Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and get practical advice from industry experts about personal finance and living debt-free. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
For the first time ever, the federal government just issued a bombshell report saying that it appears that two very large debt consulting firms in Canada are taking advantage of vulnerable consumers. Let me repeat the three most important parts of what I just said. Debt consultants taking advantage of vulnerable consumers. Civil servants don't like to point fingers, so for the government to actually put this in writing makes this easily the most amazing report ever issued by the OSB. Today I'm joined by my Hoyes Michaelis co-founder and business partner, Ted Michaelis. So, Ted, you ready to say something that you're going to regret later today?
It's unlike the civil servants. We're quite happy to point fingers.
And so, well, let's get to it then. So here's the background. The Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, the OSB, which is a division of the federal government, is responsible for regulating all licensed insolvency trustees in Canada. That's Ted and me and all of our Hoyes Michaelis trustees. They enforce the rules, and if we don't comply, we could lose our license and be out of business. So it's serious business, but it's pretty rare that the OSB actually takes away someone's license. It happens maybe once or twice a year. So it's rare. Usually, if a licensed insolvency trustee makes a mistake, the OSB works with them to correct the issue. We deal with the OSB all the time, and for the most part, they're quite reasonable, would you say, Ted?
That's a safe comment.
So what has these reasonable government employees so riled up? Well, on April 28, 2017, the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy issued a report saying that some licensed insolvency trustees have questionable relationships with debt consultants and that it's costing consumers thousands of dollars. Now, this doesn't come as a surprise to Ted and I. We've been talking about this for years. In fact, I'll put a link in the show notes to a YouTube video we filmed of a radio interview we did back in 2011. So that's 6 years ago, where we talked about this exact issue. So, Ted, before we review the OSB's report, let's start with a definition. What is a debt consultant?
All right, so there's no hard and fast definition for this. We all use it in different ways. I think what the government is saying is debt consultants are unlicensed professionals that are charging people fees to get the same sort of information or advice that they could get from a licensed insolvency trustee for free. So they're people that are specializing in accessing people's fears. You don't want to call a licensed insolvency trustee because it's scary, but you will call somebody who says, I can help you avoid bankruptcy and get rid of your debts.
Yeah, and you said the key word there, which is fees. These are people who charge fees, and we're going to throw
and they can
some
be really big
around,
fees. If you want to get me going, we can have some fun with
that.
that.
We'll get you going. I'll quote some numbers in a minute. So why does the OSB care about this then? They license us, licensed insolvency trustees. Obviously, they don't license unlicensed debt consultants. So why is this an issue for the OSB?
Well, a consumer doesn't recognize that there even is a difference here. So if somebody says they're a debt consultant, they sound like they're some sort of professional, and they're assuming that somebody is regulating them, that some kind of controls, when in fact there are none. So licensed insolvency trustees, our obligation is to present an honest and objective analysis. So when we talk to somebody, we'll show them all their options. We'll tell them these are the things that you can do. These are the ramifications of doing them. Well, if I was just some person being paid a fee for landing new customers, I may not be as forthright or honest. In fact, I know that they're not. So if the only way I make a fee is if I convince you to do a certain procedure, I'm going to sell you to do that certain procedure.
Yeah, whether it's the right thing for you to do or not. So
right.
How big a problem is this? How prevalent is this association between licensed insolvency trustees and debt consultants? So let me quote a few sections from the report. And this is, again, the government report I'm quoting. I'm not giving you my opinion. This is from the government. In 2016, in 17% of all Division II filings, that's a fancy word for consumer proposal,
right,
the debtor reported having paid for financial advice before being directed to an LIT.
Right. So that means they spoke to somebody else first, and they actually paid a fee for it.
57% of 2016 consumer proposal filings, and again, I'm quoting from the government report here, for which prior financial advice was reported, were received from LITs who had relationships with two large volume debt consultants. So this is not some little tiny conspiracy here where one guy, meets a couple of people. This is a very coordinated, very large in essence, attack on the insolvency system.
Well, and let's not hide stuff on all the percentages. So 17% of people paid a fee. More than half of those people paid it to two specific companies. So you're talking about 5,000 or 6,000 people paid one of these two companies an awful lot of money for advice actually that you can obtain for free.
Well, let me quote one more time from the report. 13 LIT firms, that's trustee firms, including one national level firm, were found to have one or more LITs operating in a frequent and sustained relationship with the two large volume firms.
Yeah.
And now the report does not name names, so I do not know for a fact which large national level firm they're talking about.
Do you think they use initials in their name?
Well, it could be. And I mean, because frankly, there are only one or two or three large national level firms, so it isn't too hard to figure out who it is. But
right.
Again, this brings the whole system into disrepute when the two big guys
Yep.
are in effect colluding to not provide great advice for vulnerable consumers. So again, the takeaways from these findings. Only 17% of proposals are affected by this. Well, I don't know. Is that a low number or a high number?
I think that's the report being affected by it.
Right, the report being affected by it. 64% of those files involved just two large debt consulting agencies, 13 LIT firms, and these are cases where the debtor unnecessarily paid for consumer proposal advice before talking to a trustee. So let's bring this home then. Why would someone, let's start with that. I think you kind of already addressed this. Why would someone contact a debt consultant before contacting
Let me give you a
LIT?
story. Somebody that came in to see me last week.
Client stories. Here we go.
So it's a married couple. They were in their, if I had to guess, they were in their 50s. They went to see, they answered one of those ads that said you can avoid bankruptcy. We can help you deal with your debts. We can reduce them up to 20%. Sounded great. They went in, they sat down with a person, and the approach was very friendly, right? There wasn't a pressure involved with it. Was, we can help you deal with your debts. Yeah, we can do all of that stuff. Here's the first step. Give me $500 today. I want you to start it with some paperwork, and we're going to set you up a meeting next week with somebody else. All right. They went to the second meeting, and it was, all right, we think you need to do this, and in fact, we need another $500 payment, and then we'll get you started by referring you to the third guy. The third guy was going to be a licensed insolvency trustee, but they didn't know that at the time. So they had two meetings. We're supposed to pay $1,000 to meet with some guy to solve their debts. The reason they contacted them in the first place was there wasn't the intimidating, I'm meeting with a licensed insolvency trustee. It used to be called bankruptcy trustees, which was probably worse. But it was, I'm just meeting with a guy who's a debt consultant. I specialize in helping people solve their problems. It's as straightforward as that. When they got in there, they realized that, wait a minute, something about this doesn't quite sound right. $500 and I can do away with my debts? They owed $50,000, by the way. And then, now we need another $500. Well, wait a minute. What was the first $500 for? Well, that was so we could meet with you and get you started. Well, what's the second one for? Well, because we've got to get all this stuff ready. And they just became suspicious because of the way this thing was unfolding. And to their credit, they did a little homework on the internet and they discovered, well, wait a minute. These guys aren't licensed insolvency trustees. These guys, they're nothing. I mean, they're not regulated by anybody. They're asking us for a fee, and now they're sending us to this third guy.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, so let's say I've got a problem with my car.
Okay, you have a problem with your car.
Thank you. So I've got a couple of choices. I can go to a certified Class A mechanic. I think that's what they're called, right?
Yep.
And he or she
unless
can
they
take
work
a
for
look.
Canadian Tire,
then it's a different story. So they can take a look at my vehicle and tell me what's wrong. Or I could pay an automotive consultant who isn't a Class A mechanic, who's just some guy who could say, yeah, I think you need this, this, and this. I could pay them a fee and then go to the expert. Well, does that make any sense?
Right. It's just, well, the perfect commercials are those LifeLock guys, right? Oh, I'm not a dentist. I'm a dental monitor. You know
I
what
have
I'm
not
talking
seen
about.
those.
It's
I
on
have
TV.
not,
You go down,
seen those
you
commercials.
sit down, and the fellow, yeah, you got a really horrible cavity. I'm going to lunch now. Aren't you going to fix it? Oh, I'm not a dentist. I just tell you that you have a cavity.
Yeah, and so if I've got a medical problem, wouldn't I just go right to the doctor? Like, doesn't that kind of make sense? So what you just described there then is exactly our problem with what debt consultants do. You go to someone who isn't licensed, doesn't have the training and the expertise. They charge you a bunch of money, and all they're actually doing is referring them to
Correct.
a licensed insolvency
What
trustee.
they're doing is
the
they're
work.
identifying that you got more debt than you can deal with, and they think you make enough money every month that you can afford to pay some fees to deal with those debts. So they're not trying to determine if this is the best solution for you or even the right solution. They're trying to determine, do you fit their criteria for somebody that they can sell this product to?
And so how does this differ from what we do?
All right. So as a licensed insolvency trustee, more than half the people I speak to don't end up having to file. So they don't need to file a proposal to the creditors or file a bankruptcy. What they need is somebody to help them analyze where they're at. So a licensed insolvency trustee will consider your finances. So what do you own? Who do you owe? How much income do you have coming in? What are you spending every month? And then is there a way to solve this problem through the various tools that we have? The first tool is, can we just help you with your budget? Well, there aren't any fees involved with this. This is helping you help yourself. Or should you be refinancing? In the current real estate market, it's amazing how many people are just going out and getting second mortgages, and we can do a show on that, I'm sure.
Oh, in fact,
We probably have.
Pretty sure last week's show was on real estate. So the point is, we're not charging any upfront fees.
Right. And if we did, we get in trouble. I mean, that's one of the advantages of dealing with somebody that's regulated by the government. We're not allowed to charge you upfront fees. If we do, we've got to disclose them to everybody, and they come out of any eventual fees that we're allowed to collect for the work we are licensed to do.
Yeah, so if you were to do a proposal and you're going to file it next month and you gave us $500 today, we would have to take that $500 and put it towards your proposal payment.
Correct.
It's pretty much that simple.
And the debt consultant puts it in their pocket.
So there's a huge difference there. Well, we're now hitting into the idea of the actual dollars involved. So again, let me pull out the government's report and read you a couple of paragraphs here, because this is kind of amazing. Costs of insolvency for consumer debtors. Debtors, and again, I'm quoting from the government's report here. These are not my words, not my opinions. Debtors served by LITs who had ongoing relationships with debt consultants usually ended up paying thousands of dollars more for the administration of their insolvency than debtors who were not sourced through a debt consultant.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like,
'Cause you're paying
that's not
somebody
hard to
twice.
understand there, is it?
Right.
They are paying thousands of dollars more. Typically, debt consultants required a consumer debtor to sign a fee agreement for consulting services prior to being introduced to a selected LIT. Debtors typically understood the role of the LIT as being limited to meeting with the debtor to file the proposal developed by the debt consultant. Right. So, and again,
that's completely backwards the way that the system is supposed to work.
Completely backwards. And so again, we can talk about clients we've dealt with, and you kind of described it pretty well with the clients you met with recently. They go to the debt consultant, and the debt consultant says, you know what, the trustee is bad.
Well, the trustee doesn't represent you.
The trustee does
not
not represent you,
The
right?
trustee's there to make money.
That's right. The trustee is just there to make money, and in fact, they'll often say the trustee represents the creditors.
Right.
And the reason they say that is you're going to pay the trustee money, and the trustee is going to give that money to the creditors. Obviously, therefore, they're working for the creditors. Whereas me, the debt consultant, I only work for you. I don't care about anything other than you, so you're paying me as this unbiased advocate for you.
Yep.
What's your response to that?
Well, the problem with that is that there's very little advocacy going on. So the concept behind being an advocate is that you're in somebody's corner, you're going to fight for them. There's very little fight involved here. They get you to fill out some paperwork. They'll forward that to the LIT that they have the relationship with, and that's what they're going to do. I mean, the LIT will tell them this is what needs to be offered for the creditors to agree. There's no secrets here. There's no magic. You're not dealing with a guy who knows something more than anybody else on the street.
Well, but what about the argument that you work for the creditors?
Yeah, and we're officers of the court. So we have a fiduciary responsibility to everyone involved, anyone who's involved in the insolvency process, the individual that's in trouble, the creditors that are receiving the payments from the trustee, the office of the superintendent, and the courts. We have to maintain this middle of the road. The analogy I always use is we're referees. So think of us as a hockey game, right? We're the guys who enforce the rules. We don't write the laws. We tell you if you're offside, if you're onside. And it's the same for either team. We don't look at one side or the other. If we do, we're not doing our job. You won't have us back as a referee.
Right. And that's a key point. Up front, we tell you here are the rules. Here's how they work.
Right.
So you know what you're getting yourself into. And this whole notion that we work for the creditors, well, no. Ultimately, you come to us. You select us to be your LIT. And if we do a lousy job, you're going to be telling all your friends that we did a lousy job. If we treat you fairly and get the result that you want, you're going to be telling all your friends that it worked out great. We've been in business since 1999, so that's 18, 19 years now.
Yep.
And a lot of our work is referral work. People have dealt with us. They send their friends and their family members. So I can pretty much guarantee you the debt consultants aren't getting a lot of referral work. Now let me read another paragraph because this will blow your brains from the government report. In the cases reviewed, the amount of the consulting fee portion of the agreement between the consumer debtor and the debt consultant averaged approximately $2,400 and reached as high as $4,200. Like, what more do I need to say about that?
So, folks, what you need to understand, anybody listening to this, is that what the OSB is doing here is trustees are paid a portion of what you pay to your creditors as an administrative fee. And they're saying whatever you pay to this debt consultant before you pay any proposal payments is now an additional pure fee. And they're right. So I'll give you a numeric example. You're going to pay back $20,000 on $60,000 worth of debt, about a third. And that's a pretty typical proposal.
Yep.
The fees on that $20,000 are going to run about $4,500. Somewhere in that. Does that sound right? 20, 18, 36. No, about $5,100. There aren't any upfront fees. That's what the trustee will get paid over the 4 or 5 years while you pay it out. If you went to a debt consultant first, they would charge you, probably on that size of debt, $1,500. 3 payments of $500 each. So now instead of paying fees of $5,000, you've paid fees of $6,500. So have you got so much money in your pocket that you can afford to pay an extra $1,500 that you didn't have to pay?
It's crazy.
And that's really the question.
Well, and let me read you one more sentence from the government's report. For lower value proposals, so that would be a proposal where maybe the total payments are $10,000, $15,000, something like that.
Right.
The consulting fee commonly ranged from 20 to nearly 40% of the value of the proposal.
Sure, because if you were paying back $10,000, so let's say you owed about $30,000, the fees for that would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,200. If you paid $1,500 in consulting fees up front, now you're paying $4,700.
Well, and to pay 40% more for something and get zero extra value is crazy. It's like, well, you can go to this place and get your oil changed for $100, or you can go over there and pay $140. Okay, if it's the same thing, I think I'll take the 100. Thank you very much.
Well, and people have to understand that this may come across as sour grapes, so that we have a bias because we're the licensed insolvency trustees and we don't deal with these guys. But the reason we don't deal with these guys is because, frankly, I think they're crooks. I mean, if you can get advice, competent advice, for free, or you go to a not-for-profit and maybe they charge you $10, we'll talk about that some more. What's the point in paying somebody $1,500? I just don't get it.
Their argument is, we are looking out for you, and so you go to the trustee, and the trustee is going to say, well, you need to file a proposal where you pay $300 a month for 5 years. You know what? You really only need to pay $150 a month. The trustee is charging you more money because they make more money.
Right.
But guess what? It's the creditors who vote on the proposal. So if we recommend that you file a proposal and pay $300 a month, we can offer a proposal of $150, but the creditors are going to say, no, we want more money.
Right.
We do a couple of hundred of these every month. And we've been doing them for years and years and years.
Right. So we keep track of what creditors vote what ways and what their minimum expectations are.
Yeah, we've got a very detailed internal system, and you can't see it because this is a radio show, but on the other side of these walls here, we've got a group of 6 people who do nothing but proposals, and they keep track of every single one we do. So if someone comes in to see me and they say, okay, I owe money to the Royal Bank or the Canadian Tire or CIBC or whatever, we can go look in our system and we can see all the previous votes that company has done. And we know that, you know what, they're going to look for this particular term. They want 30 cents on the dollar. They want 15 cents on the dollar, whatever. So a debt consultant doesn't have access to that kind of information.
Well, they never actually interrelate with the creditors.
They never talk to them, no.
That's the other part of this thing that really drives me crazy is they'll tell you when you come see them, stop making your payments. Stop answering the phones. Oh, don't worry about those collection letters. The reason they're doing that is once you stop dealing with any of your debts in the normal course of business, you're pushing yourself down a road. And so you've talked to the debt consultant. They've told you to do all these things, but you haven't made your decision yet how you want to solve the problem. Well, they're forcing you into a decision. Once you stop making those payments, it's not like you can catch them up again. So now you're 2 months down the road, you haven't made a decision, and somebody's threatening you with a lawsuit. Well, it's too late to just try and negotiate or budget or do something else. You need a real solution, and they've got you. They've got a hook in you now. They're going to say, well, look, we'll get you in to see our guy really quickly. You got to pay us that fee and get it done.
Well, it's kind of like going to a real estate agent saying, I want to buy a house. And they say, no problem. We can get you a better deal on a house. So I've got two different real estate agents who I'm thinking of hiring. And one of them says, we can get you that house for $300,000, and the other one says no, that house is worth $450,000. Okay, I guess I'll go with the $300,000 one. Right. I put in my bid at $300,000. Well, guess what? It gets rejected. The buyer has no obligation to take something that's well below market value. I mean, again, let me read from the government's report. The OSB took a look at proposals, and the OSB's comparison of the data identified a consistent difference in the frequency of files with very low proposed values. That's just what I just talked about, underbidding on a proposal. LIT's working with debt consultants filed 5-year consumer proposals with payments under $100 per month about 14 to 19% of the time. This compares with only 4% of such proposals filed by the control group of LIT. So in your experience, Ted, I mean, okay, would you say that, yeah, it's probably less than 4% where we're doing a proposal that's $400 or $100 a month or less?
Yeah, I mean, the reason that somebody does a proposal that size is that, well, they're afraid of the whole idea of a bankruptcy. And I don't want to turn this into a bankruptcy versus proposal thing, but if you are on social assistance or fixed income, limited means, and somebody convinces you to pay $75 a month for 5 years when you could pay probably less than $100 a month for 9 months, who are they helping? I mean, they're putting money in their pocket because they put you into a proposal. They got to charge you a fee. Probably the right answer for that person was a bankruptcy, but that's not what this show's about.
A bankruptcy or doing nothing. And as I said earlier in the show, these debt consultants overwhelmingly are recommending consumer proposals.
They are, because in most cases they can't charge any sort of a fee or a consulting fee if you're going to do a bankruptcy. So if the correct answer is that you need to file bankruptcy, it's hard to justify paying them $1,500 when the bankruptcy itself probably only costs $1,800.
Yeah, the typical bankruptcy would do, if you have no surplus income, no assets, you're probably paying a couple $100 a month for 9 months.
Right.
The average fee that a debt consultant charges is $2,400. The OSB said that. So why would you pay $2,400 to a debt consultant who's doing nothing and then actually only pay the trustee $1,800? It makes no sense.
Right.
They have to justify their fees, and the way they do that is by putting you into a proposal, making a lowball offer. And then, of course, what happens, the creditors come back and say, well, we're not accepting 4 cents on the dollar. That's crazy. And then who gets blamed for it? Oh, it's the LIT. The debt consultant says, oh, sorry, I'm out of the picture now.
Well, and a worse example is, so let's say the creditors do agree to it, and you get 3 years into paying $75 a month, and you stop paying because it just wasn't sustainable. Well, your bankruptcy would have been over a year and a half ago. You would have had all that money in your pocket, and now you got to file bankruptcy anyway because the proposal, you weren't able to complete it. I mean, the debt consultant really doesn't care because they got their fee up front. They got their first transaction in. Once they're through with you, they're on to the next guy.
Yeah, and the way we get paid, and again, our fees are licensed by the federal government, regulated. Every LIT gets the same percentage of the pot in a proposal. We get paid as we send money to the creditors. So the creditors accept the proposal, and then every few months we're sending them what's called a dividend, a payment towards the debt. We get our fee at that point. So if the creditors vote no on the proposal, we're not getting paid. If we make the proposal too onerous that you can't afford it and it fails, we're not getting any further payments after that point.
And, of course, the debt consultant was paid in full before they referred you to actually file the proposal.
Yeah, so whether it works or not, they don't care whether it works or not. So, okay. Before we get to the practical advice section of the podcast, I want to discuss what the OSB is actually going to do about this and what you think they should do. So I'll tell you what they say they're going to do. They've issued this as a kind of a moral suasion, let's throw it out there. From the OSB's report, they say that, quote, over the next year, the OSB will initiate a series of amendments to OSB directives, BIA forms, and compliance programs to address the risks and issues identified in this report. Areas of focus will include fulfillment of the LIT's responsibilities in all aspects of the insolvency process, et cetera, et cetera. So they're saying that we're going to make some tweaks.
Right.
Okay, I guess making some tweaks is better than doing nothing. I mean, if there's some murderer running around, I don't know if
one of the
tweaks are the
challenges
answer,
they
but-
have is the largest firm in the country is guilty of this.
Yeah,
And
as
so-
they said, that's in their report that it's a large and a.
So it'll be
and
interesting
I
to see how they tweak the largest firm in the country.
Yeah, it's kind of like a banking regulator knowing that the biggest bank in Canada is doing bad stuff. Well, what are you going to do? Shut down the biggest bank in Canada? That's
and
kinda
that was
hard.
just an example. We don't know if the biggest bank in Canada is doing bad.
No,
stuff.
I'm sure they're perfectly reasonable people and doing everything fantastically. But
Certainly.
okay, so what the OSB is saying is we're going to make some minor tweaks.
Right.
What do you think they should do? This is a very serious problem. They've identified the fact that consumers on average are paying $2,400 to these debt consultants who do nothing.
Well, it's better than that because they can tell from filing patterns which trustees or which licensed insolvency trustees are doing this. So, for example, if a trustee doesn't have an office in St. Catharines and they're doing 25 new files a month in St. Catharines, probably they're getting work
How is
referred
that
to them
possible?
from somewhere,
Yeah.
right? They haven't got an office, but they're doing all that work. So they easily know who it is that's guilty of this. If a trustee does 95% of their files are consumer proposals and very few bankruptcies, well, probably they're not seeing the public themselves. They're getting their work referred to them.
Because on average, most trustees, it's a
pretty even
relatively
split.
even split between proposals and
And
bankruptcy.
intuitively, that's what it should be. So if you're giving people the right advice, either you can help them without filing anything, or half the time they'll file a proposal to repay part of the debt, or half the time, you know what? File the bankruptcy, get on with your life more quickly. If a debt consultant's not getting a fee for bankruptcies or telling them they don't need any help, well, you know what they're going to sell them. So what should you do? The biggest single thing, don't pay any fees up front.
Well,
If
but I'm
anybody asks-
asking,
well,
and we'll get into that.
can
What
the
should the
OSB do? Oh,
OSB
that's right,
do?
yeah.
What should the OSB do? So
Well-
I'm appointing you the superintendent of bankruptcy now.
well, that's great.
That's great. You're the new
All right,
guy.
I want my 8 weeks vacation. Well, that's a different conversation.
So what?
Do I get a pension?
Yes, you get a pension. So what should they be doing?
All right. Well, again, so they can identify easily who they think are I'm going to call them the guilty LITs.
The guilty
people
parties.
that are acting in a way
Okay,
that's
so they've
not
got this list.
correct.
They know
Yep.
who's doing it.
Right. So the first thing they should do is moral suasion. Okay, we know who you are. We've identified you. Fly right.
And that's exactly what this report
Right.
is. I
So
think
that's
this
the
is
first
the
step.
first shot, the shot across the bow.
So the second step is if somebody's not smart enough to pay attention to that, well they call it a Chinese customs inspection. So the example is you send a load of produce into China, and they're not going to ban its arrival, but it'll sit on the docks until it's rotten, and then they'll release it. So the trustee, all of our trustees' fees have to be approved by the Office of the Superintendent before we can actually complete a file. So they could just slow down the paperwork, and it doesn't have to be anything. What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, gum up the works is
Yeah.
what you're talking about. So what you're talking about in a bankruptcy, there's a letter of comment that's issued at the end of the file, and that's when we can draw our final fees. Well, right now for us, that happens pretty much automatically. We push a few buttons on the computer, a few
Comes
minutes
right back.
later, it comes right back. But yes, they could do a more manual review, and it could take weeks or months.
And with a proposal, they could simply start reviewing proposals.
Well, they could request creditors meetings.
Yep.
And in fact, they have been doing that in the discount clauses issue, which we're not going to get into because we don't have the time for that, and it's already been solved. But that's exactly what they were doing. They identified an anomaly,
Right.
and so they said, whenever we see that anomaly, we're going to request a creditors meeting. And in most cases, in most consumer proposals we do, there is no creditors meeting. Or if one is required, it's just a paper thing. You
Right,
know, here,
it's
sign a
done
piece
by
of paper.
fax and
Done
email.
by fax. Nobody actually shows up. But the OSB could say, we are going to chair all those creditors meetings. So for that big trustee firm that's doing this, and for those LITs that we know are getting most of their work from these guys, let's have creditors meetings for every single one of your files.
And that dramatically increases the cost to the LIT of doing the work because we don't get paid by the amount of time we put into a file. We get paid a percentage of the money that's flowing through. So if I suddenly have to do an extra 5 or 6 hours worth of work, the file isn't profitable anymore.
Especially and it's a real hassle for the debtor. Because now you got to take a day off work, you got to show up at this meeting, you
and there's
gotta answer
anxiety.
questions.
Why am I having a meeting? My friend did one of these with Hoyes
Hoyes
Michaels
Michaelis.
down the road, and there was no meeting.
Everything was fine. They could also do examinations of the debtor.
Yep, to find out how much did you pay and was it properly disclosed. But if they really want to do something about this, if they find out that a fee was paid to a debt consultant, they have the right to have it deducted from the trustee's fees in the file. And so suddenly it's not the consumer paying the fees up front, it's the LIT paying the fees. And I think that would dramatically change things too, because if I was going to get paid $4,000 worth of fees on a proposal and I had to pay $2,400 or had $2,400 deducted because I paid a consultant first, I don't know that I'd do the file.
It gets to the if it was a $2,400 fee and the $2,400 deduction, you're working for free.
Right.
So at some point, it doesn't make any sense. Well, and I guess the other thing they could do is actually print a list of the offending parties.
Sure. I mean, if they published a list saying these are the guys that are performing this practice, without saying good or bad, just saying these are the people that are using debt consultants, you can decide for yourself if it's worth the money.
And you think word would get around pretty quickly. Consumers would go, okay.
Yeah, we've been harping on this thing now for over a decade, and they're still in business. In fact, they're probably busier than they've ever been. So
right, and so that's why we're doing this podcast today, in the hopes that we can actually get the word out that this is a serious issue. And again, this is not just our opinion. The government has finally, we've been on this case for 5, 6, 7 years. They've finally done some research and issued a report that says, we're going to think about it. We might do something. So hopefully it's progress. Okay, so we've given the OSB advice. We know you're watching, so hopefully you've taken these things into account.
Listening, it's radio.
Absolutely. Well, this is going to be on YouTube as well if the video recording
look up
works.
every once in a while.
Exactly. So. And for the OSB, I'm, Ted and I are more than happy to fly to Ottawa and chat with you in person and give you our thoughts. But what about the person who is listening to us now, the actual individual who's got some debt issues and they're trying to figure out, okay, who can I trust? Should I go to a debt consultant? What about you guys? How do I know if I'm being treated fairly? What practical advice can you give them?
So this is where I was going before. So we jumped the gun a little bit. So let's start this by saying that at the end of the day, it's your decision. If you decide that there's value in paying these guys a fee before you actually talk to a licensed insolvency trustee, we're not going to stop you. I mean, you're an adult. You got to decide what's right for you. But some warning signs for you. You shouldn't ever have to pay an upfront fee. So if somebody meets with you for free, and at the end of the meeting they say is, well, okay, but now to go any further, you got to give me $500. Wait a minute. Trustee's not going to ask you for $500. That's probably money that's going to a debt consultant.
And that's real simple advice to understand. Yeah. We do not charge upfront fees, number one, because we think it's unethical, but number two, we're not allowed to. The rules say we can't do it. So you do not pay us anything until the paperwork has been filed with the government.
So there's a test for you, right? So you met with somebody because they've done that first meeting for free. At the end of the meeting, they ask for money. All right. So at this point, you shouldn't be signing anything. Don't make any sort of commitments. You want to think about this some more. The follow-up question as soon as somebody asks you for money should be, are you a licensed insolvency trustee? And if that doesn't make you comfortable, are you actually going to do the work for me? Because if they're a debt consultant, they can't. If the guy comes back and says, well, I'm going to refer you to my guy down the street, he's going to actually do that filing. Okay, so why am I paying you money then?
Yeah, when I go in for my surgery consult, I'd like to talk to the surgeon, not someone who knows the guy who knows the guy who knows the surgeon. I mean,
right.
I want to know who I'm dealing with. So don't pay upfront fees. Don't sign a contract to pay anything until you've met with an LIT. Only deal with an LIT. And I guess even more basic than that, ask what fees am I being charged?
Right. What's the upfront cost? What are you asking me to pay and why?
And we're happy for you to ask us that question too, because again, our fees are set by the government. It's right in the proposal what we're getting paid.
And again, if the guy says it's $1,500 and you think that's $1,500 well spent, then I respect your decision to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of people who will go talk to their accountant or their lawyer first and pay their accountant or lawyer money. Okay, that's fine. I've got no problem with that, particularly if you're in a business situation. Maybe it makes a lot of sense because there may be tax implications and whatnot. Yeah. But in that case, you know what you're getting. They charge you by the hour. You've been dealing with them in the past, and they have no incentive to refer you to one person or another.
Right.
They're probably giving you independent advice. But when you're dealing with a debt consultant, and I guess the other question you could ask them, so, okay, you're going to be referring me to someone. do you only refer to one different party?
Yeah. Can I get a list? Who should I be talking to?
Right. I mean, with the not-for-profit credit counselors that we deal with in most of the cities we're in, they have a list of 3 or 4 different LITs that they've met with, pre-approved. They know they're legit. So they don't send everybody to the same person. Right. In most cases, they spread them around. So, okay. So I think that's really good advice. What are your final comments then on anything to do with debt consultants, the OSB, or people who are listening who may have issues with any of this?
So I get the attraction. The debt consultant is allowed to basically play on your fears, not only of the debts that you have, but of having to talk to a licensed insolvency trustee. It was better for them when we were called bankruptcy trustees because that's an even scarier name. So they are playing on your anxiety and your fear because you don't want to do that. You want to do something better. So anytime a deal sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't true. They're going to meet with you for free up front because the first time they meet with you, it'll be, yes, come on in for a free consultation. And more of these are being done over the internet or by phone now. But the conversation always ends with, okay, I think we can help you. I need that $500. And so they'll immediately ask you for money. And that's your warning sign. Wait a minute. You haven't done anything yet. Why do I need to give you money?
Yeah, it's pretty much as simple as that. Don't be signing anything. Don't be paying any money before something is filed. Deal with a licensed insolvency trustee. Simple as that.
And you can use the second opinion thing on trustees. So you go to see a licensed insolvency trustee and call another one, go see another one. I mean, we call that opinion shopping, but quite frankly, it's your life. You got the right to look around and make sure you're comfortable with the people you're dealing with and you're getting advice that you can live with.
Well, and I think I met with 2 people in the last week who had been to see another LIT and they just weren't comfortable. They didn't understand the explanations they were getting. Well, great. Go see someone else then. We get a lot of work from that too. So excellent. Well, I think that's an excellent way to end it. That's our show for today. Full show notes, including links to the Bombshell Government Report and all of the previous videos and articles we've written on this topic can be found at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. If you want to have your say, there's a link on the OSB webpage so that you can send a message directly to the government explaining that you don't think vulnerable consumers should be scammed by debt consultants who only want to take their money. So feel free to take advantage of that. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.